work for the NHS Leadership Academy, which is an organisation came into being in 2012 in response to the mid-staff to try and improve leadership across the NHS. So my day job is kind of setting up virtual campuses and things that aid in leadership learning. But kind of alongside that, I end up working quite a bit on content sites. And obviously that's kind of what I'm talking tonight about. So the main issue we came across last year is something that isn't that uncommon, especially in the NHS, but I would imagine in the wider community, is that we've got a lot of information to share with the world, but we don't have an in-house designer. We've got lots of people who know how to code and how to make things go whiz bang and add functionality, but we've got no way of validating that what we've done is correct. So we don't know whether it's accessible. We've got ways of testing whether it's mobile friendly and so on, but again, we've not got formal testing with that. We don't know whether carousels are a good thing, except for anecdotal evidence. So what do we do? We basically had four options, and I'd imagine most organisations have similar things to this, but I'm going to speak about the NHS because that's the scenarios I'm familiar with. So option one is botch together something, use the NHS blue and slap a logo on the top and hope for the best. Option two is get an external contractor or agency, sling some money at them and hope for the best. The third one is repurpose our old design, put a little bit of shiny on it and hope that's good enough. And the fourth one is find a design that already exists and use that. So we are lucky enough, there's an organisation called NHS Digital, and at the start of last year, they put out a design, but it's HTML. So we've got a website ready to go. To coin a phrase, you might say it was oven ready. And I got one of those dreaded calls from my boss, 4:30 p.m. on a Friday. This site was due to launch on a Monday. And he just, just quite elegantly snuck in. Do you think we should push this back a bit and use that new NHS design instead? So, just dropped a massive bomb on me in one go. But we're believers in do something once, but do it well. And then we're kind of trying to lead the way with the GDS ethos of do things in the open so that they're only done once and they can be shared. So that's where this theme was born. Somehow we had to figure out how to turn this HTML design with loads of sass and, lots of functionality and loads of user testing behind it into a WordPress theme. So as I said, we kind of decided we'd work in the open from the get-go. So our Git repo was public. We did a proof of concept over a weekend, got it out, and basically said, right, this is it. This is what we're going to do. There's massive advantages to using open source. I'm speaking to the converted, I would imagine, as WordPress users.
Yes.
But the fact that, the NHS design that had been put out is open source, it's really well documented. So that was a quick win there. We've then got WordPress, which is massively documented. There are so many tutorials out there. There's so many pools of knowledge. And speaking selfishly, it's something that I've got quite a bit of experience with, so I was on familiar ground. So to start with, and once we'd done a proof of concept, we got together lots of different NHS organisations, put them in a room and basically said, what do you want this thing to do? We're going to do it. We know what we want from it. So kind of a use case gathering. And we also invited some agencies, the external agencies that supply websites into the NHS. And in the 7 months this project's been going, we've kind of continued that ethos. So we've got contributions in the code that come from external agencies, that come from freelancers, and some that just come from people who are what might be called hobbyist coders, people that don't do it for a living but enjoy doing it and wanted to contribute. So one of the things we wanted to make sure was that right from the start and the outset, we had everything baked in so that anybody who was using this could just click a button, have it installed, and away you go. So we want to remove all the technical barriers that people have when they're editing and adding content to site. We don't want them playing with the HTML. We want them using the pre-built components, and knowing that what comes out the other side is going to be accessible. It's going to scale on different devices. I've got the Lighthouse scores down there. They bother me. The fact it's 98 on accessibility really gets my goat. But there's a reason for that. It's because WordPress insists on using jQuery 1.11, I think it is. And the Google Lighthouse score doesn't like that. That's the reason it's been knocked down. Because I want this theme on the WordPress repo, I can't override that. But it still bothers me. I'm going to keep working and beavering away until I can get straight hundreds across the board. Also worth mentioning that those are dependent on the content. So somebody could install this, put junky content in and drag those scores straight down. So I think it's worth mentioning why the NHS would use WordPress. Again, I'm preaching to the converted. You're all WordPress users. You're at a WordPress meetup, so you're already sold on the platform. But one of the problems within the NHS is the idea that if you don't pay for something, it can't be very good. So using a content management system where people are able to go in, especially clinicians as the subject experts, have them being able to go in and add the content straight away. We've then got a big tick in a box somewhere. So they might not be paying for it, but there we go. We've just removed an obstacle. We've removed a gatekeeper. You can actually update your own content. We've also got the fact that it now powers 35% of the top 10 million websites in the world. Again, just helps us to sell this to users as a good platform to use. And from our point of view, as technical people, it means obviously we've got the backing and the experience across the piece. The fact it's open source feeds into our ethos that we're trying to propagate out there. And the fact that many of the internet agencies the NHS is using are familiar, and lots of our staff, whether they're technical staff or not, will actually understand what WordPress is and be able to contribute. When we first decided to kind of go out to meetups, I did a quick Google for .nhs.uk and powered by WordPress, and I came up with 4,550 results, which blew me away, because most of the sites don't have the powered by WordPress credit in the footer.
Yes.
So I think that shows the huge amount of websites across the NHS that are already using this, which then leads me on to the opportunity, the reason why we're doing this. So it's the fact that we can do consistent, accessible, device agnostic design right the way across, and we can offer it free of charge to any organization that wants it. That helps them reduce the cost and time developing new sites, and it means that the web development becomes much simpler. What tends to happen internally in the NHS is somebody will decide they need a website and they will go to an IT department. IT departments, not to denigrate what they do at all, but they're really good at computers. They're not necessarily good at the web. And that's how we end up with some of the sites that are not as good as they should be, or they then get outsourced. And hopefully by doing this, we're trying to kind of bypass that and make it so it's a nice, easy route that anybody can do and say, right, I'm going to install the WordPress site. There are so many hosts out there that allow you to do it one click. I'm going to add this plugin. I'm going to add this theme. Again, it's all point and click. It also increases the pool of freelancers and agencies who can deliver NHS websites. So instead of having to go to bigger agencies that have in-house design teams, we're now able to go to people that specialize, that can add value. Helps raise standards, and also means that as and when updates are required, we can push out an update to the plugin. It's automatically notified in WordPress. Hopefully, we then avoid some of the security black holes. So the aim, this is not yet live because the WordPress theme review team still haven't approved the theme. It's been in the queue a long time. I'll come on to that a bit later on. But the aim is once it's approved, it will be a one-click install. People don't have to, there's no technical barriers whatsoever. And the fact that you can retrospectively add it to a pre-existing site without needing to start over from scratch. So if you've already got a WordPress site, you can apply the theme and all of the content will just work. So I'm aware that obviously I'm speaking to WordPress users, and most of what I've just said is stuff you already know, but I thought it was worth just kind of setting the scene for how we got to starting where we're coming from. So we started with the low-hanging fruit, if you like. So within the framework that the NHS digital team put in were lots of components, and originally we looked at doing these using ACF and then putting them into blocks, so advanced content fields. The author of advanced content fields was really helpful. It gave us an NHS-wide free license for it, and it was brilliant. But one of our criteria was to remove technical barriers, and this didn't do that. It was brilliant for anybody who was technically minded. They could go in, they could make everything stand on its head and do exactly what they wanted. When we put non-technical users in front of it, even with documentation, they just had this panicked look on their face. So I decided to bite the bullet and go and learn React, which is not the friendliest of languages to go and learn from scratch, but it was worth doing. And we ended up creating the plugin called NHS Blocks. So all of the components are point and click. We don't want users going anywhere near code at all. We just want them adding content in. All of the design blocks that are in the front end library, we've converted to Gutenberg blocks. And the variants are really easy to switch between. So as I say, it's about making it accessible, not just from the end point of view, from the visitors coming to the site, but also from the content editors. Hopefully this is going to work. It's a video being streamed via video. Is that coming through?
It
Fantastic.
is.
Okay, so this is just a quick kind of demo of somebody editing a site. And you can see over on the right-hand side, you've got the style variants on there. So it's literally what you see is what you get, all of the benefits of Gutenberg. So nobody's going to edit content, press save, and then be presented with something they weren't expecting. And adding new blocks, even adding the paragraphs, we can change the colors. So we've put all the branding colors in there under a color settings option over on the right-hand side, which the video will now show. I'm a little bit ahead of the video, I do apologize. There you go. And then when you add a new block, there's a whole new section called NHS, and you go in. The one that just showed there was the dashboard block, something I'm quite proud of, something at that point nobody else had done, which was having pre-formatted layouts available within the blocks. I spent a whole week learning how to do that, put it out, and then Gutenberg released an update which included the columns block, which was exactly what I'd just done, but in a different way. But I'm still happy I did it. A, I know in my head I was the first one to do it and put it out. But B, when the columns block came out, it showed me that I'd approached it in the right way. We've then got things like a hero block. So this one's slightly different. When you add it to the back end, it shows where it is. When you save it, it automatically goes to the top of the page. I've used a little bit of jQuery magic, but it was the only way I could add it as a block and get it to show where I wanted it to. So in a second, the video will be update, and then it will show you the front end side of it. So you can see the heroes being moved up to the top. All of the content's there exactly as it was in the editor. So hopefully we don't get any surprises and users are getting what they expect to see. So what we've got so far is definitely MVP. It's production ready, it's on production websites. As of yesterday, we've got 27 NHS websites using this, collecting feedback, adding to our issue log, making sure that what we're doing is actually useful for end users. But the purpose of me virtually coming to events like this is basically to say we're fully aware it can be so much better. For the most part, this has been a solo project that I've done over the last 7 months. We've had 7 other contributors chip in, but it's open source. We're kind of appealing for help and saying, even if it's just give it a once over and say that could have been done a different way, this is all useful. We kind of, or I'm trying to be very egoless about it and say, look, please criticize the code because I know it can be better and there's subject experts out there that can definitely add to it. So I think probably the sensible thing to do at this stage is actually to show you the thing. If my screen decides it's not going to be stupid. There we go. So if I come out of there and go in,
I love your achievement unlocked, Tony.
Thank you. Yeah, reaching the benchmark of the point where I could say, right, we can actually put this on sites was definitely one of those punch the air moments.
Yeah.
You know, I'm sure everyone in the room's familiar with the challenges you face sometimes as a developer, especially when you're working solo. I work remotely, so it's kind of like I'm back in my freelancer days.
Yeah.
You know, you're fighting with code by yourself, having bouts of Tourette's at a screen that isn't going to answer back. And particularly the Gutenberg learning curve was a particularly steep one, but one I'm very pleased I did. So the elements as I say, it's kind of broken down to, we've got a theme and a plugin, and the idea is they're symbiotic. The reason we broke it down that way is because we wanted the theme to go out on the WordPress repo, and you can't have content in the theme repo, but you can use the blocks and release those as a plugin. The plugin has been approved, so that's available for anyone to download right now, and then the theme will kind of come later down the line. But when you install the theme, it will suggest the plugin is added.
Right.
So what you've got here is a blog archive page. You can see we've got the blocks showing up. This is not the blocks plugin. This is the theme controlling the layout here. And then if I go to, let's go to page A just for fun because it's empty. You can see the comments, again, is styled by the theme. If I go into the edit side of things, of course, because I'm on a call, it's going to be nice and slow loading. You can see when I go to the plus, I've got a whole section here called NHS front-end blocks, and we've currently got 10 blocks sitting in there. The aim is to end up with 15. There's a couple of components that the NHS digital team have added, and there's one in here that isn't part of the NHS digital, but we thought would be really useful. So that's the dashboard navigation block. So when you go to dashboard navigation, you've got pre-configured layouts there. So if you choose one of those, we'll just go for 2. What you like in, you can either have a single block color as the background, or you can upload an image. So I'm just going to choose one from the media library for brevity, and that automatically puts it behind there. And then adding a link, you can either do it on the block editor controls, or you can do it over on the right-hand side. Again, we kind of added it both places by looking at a couple of people playing with it and seeing, you know, how they found things.
Yeah.
So there we go. That's now a linked item. And again, you've got the second one over there. If I go to a different block, so the do and don't list, excuse me. This is one of the nice fun things with Gutenberg. Because I've set this up with inner blocks, it's put a block inside a block, which is not desired outcome, and I can't quite figure a way of getting around that. There we go. Let's go there. Always the way when you show things live, isn't it? So then we've got the option to do and don't list. Now, this is something that particularly secondary care, like hospital and GP websites, are really keen on. We don't use it particularly in Leadership Academy, but it's particularly important for things like, you know, are you showing symptoms of chickenpox? What should and shouldn't you do?
Yeah.
So it's just got simple items. So you can either say do this or don't do this.
Yeah.
You know, and again, it's just got the inner blocks. So you just do plus, and you can add as many as you like. The other thing that's worth showing is on the theme itself, you've got the customizer options. So if I just go to that. So we're still expanding these based on user feedback. So we've got simple things like, would you like a search box to show up in the top? Yes or no. Would you like the logo to be white? Some NHS organisations are very particular about their branding and they prefer the blue on the white. Others prefer the white on the blue. So we've just put that in there as an option. And then in the site identity, we've got the option to put your own logo up instead of the NHS one, to suppress the NHS logo. So this can be used on non-NHS websites. And also to show the logo either as it is, so you've got the 2 rows, or whether to show it, sorry, the 2 rows, it's not going to do it, is it? Let's use the logo. There we go. So you can show it in line with just a site title, or you can show it a block. So for example, the block would be useful for, example, for Great Ormond Street NHS Foundation Trust. They'd want the NHS Foundation Trust as the second row. And we've then put in options as well to change the colour. So it doesn't have to be the NHS blue. You can make it purple, for example. For some reason, the customizer doesn't show that on first load. But if I come off there and go back, it will now show the whole site in purple. If I go back to customize, now it does show the color changes. Again, if anyone's got ideas for how to make that not behave in that way, I'd be very grateful. So we've just added lots of different options. And the other thing, if I just publish that as grey, I'll just go to a page that has subpages. So we've got a right-hand menu. Then if I edit this, we've also got the option within a page to change the page color itself. So we can make this one, let's go with bright red, just so it's obvious. And if I update this page and then view it, you will see the top takes the settings that I gave the whole site, but the page itself is now using red.
Right.
And likewise, any of the blocks that were on that page that on the editor are shown as blue would then inherit that red color.
Right.
So it's just trying to build in as much flexibility as we can to it, so that it's a single theme that is usable across every scenario. And in the process, it's actually making it a useful theme for non-NHS settings. So as an example, I'm using this on our local residents association.
Right. I was going to say, I mean, it's almost just a very good theme to use when you want something that works with Gutenberg, because it's so nicely done with a customizer and everything.
Thank you. With the, as I said, we're fully aware that the NHS is, it also encompasses quite a lot of social care that then can't use the NHS logo.
Yeah.
But they're actually kind of pseudo NHS organisations. So, and then there's also charities that feed into the NHS. So, for example, MenCap is one quite local to here. Mm-hmm. So, you know, they would find this usable. They know it's accessible. They know it's going to work on all devices.
Yeah,
it's free, you know. So, if we can benefit the wider community, why wouldn't we? It's kind of my approach.
Yeah.
So, bear with me 2 seconds. Just need to get my notes to come up. Where the heck have my notes gone? There we go. Right, let's just pull those over here and then go back. Okay, so I kind of just want to touch on the process of coding with Gutenberg. I took a bit of a different approach to building the blocks. Because I came into it as a complete novice, I kind of went and watched some video tutorials and found what I could online. One of those videos had a really nice scaffolding that was already built in. So I kind of thought, well, it works for me. I like what's here, so I've extended that out. So what happens is the code is all separated out, and I'll show you in a second how, and I then use Node to generate the single React file. But it just means that when you're editing, it's much, much easier. And it also means if you're collaborating, somebody can be working on a completely different block to you at the same time, and you reduce the Git conflicts.
Okay.
So just to show you, hopefully that's showing up nicely, the structure that I've got of my repo. But all of the SAS and images are separated out into an assets folder. There's a build folder, but I don't touch that at all. That is generated by the node, the npm. All of my work is inside a source folder, and inside the source folder, each block is in its own folder and has its own index.js. And that just means, as I said, it's nice and easy to read. You haven't got a massive long file to go and find. And for example, on the dashboard one, you'll see I've pre-configured the templates. It was about 300 lines of code. And every time scrolling, I know it sounds silly, but just separating it out just makes my life a little bit easier.
Yeah.
So within the index, I've just used the button one as an example here. So right at the very top, I start by importing all of the pre-configured React classes and functions that I want for the block. And then I register the block and just give it a name. So all of these are in the NHS blocks namespace. And then I've just named this one NHS button. That just means it's a unique name and it's not going to conflict with any other blocks plugin out there. I give it a title, choose which category it's going to sit in. That's for when you choose the block to add. That's kind of like the tabs. Give it an icon. There's actually loads and loads of icons already available that you can use, as you don't need to come up with anything funky on that. And then you can see in this example, I've got my style variants sat there. So just add those as an array. After that, you then go into an edit routine. Within the constants, you can add attributes, and inside the attributes, you basically put all of the different elements that you want to change within your block. Also, and this took quite a while for me to get my head around, is setting a constant of what happens when a variable changes, which just, it blew my mind a bit and took me quite a while to get my head around a constant being a changed variable, but there you go, that's how React works. And all of the content within the edit is then transmitted inside an attributes array. So the edit then finishes off with a return function, and the return dictates what actually shows on the editor view. So in this example, you'll see I've got inspector controls at the top. That's what shows in the right-hand panel when you're editing. So inside there, I've put the link option. And then you close the inspector controls, go into block controls, which is what shows above the element that you're editing. So in this example, I've used alignment, and I've inherited the native alignment that's already built in WordPress. So, you know, one of the nice things is if a block has already got something, you can reuse it. And then once we come out of the block controls, I then just create a div, and inside that put standard HTML with a couple of variables. The other thing that tripped me up was this rich text, and the rich text is basically saying anything that's typed in there, just put the raw output in. Once you've done that, you then go into a save routine, and the save routine is kind of, it's the nice tidy bit at the end of it. And if you've done the edit bit nicely, the save is really sensible and logical and just makes sense. So again, I've redeclared the constant of attributes, and inside that I've got an array of what variables I've added. And I've just realized this is going to have a major problem because I haven't actually saved the alignment. It's awesome. It's one of the benefits of looking at your code with fresh eyes. What I've also tried to do all the way along is, you'll see I've got, for example, here the console.info, so I can have it echoing out into the console exactly what's happening. But I've also tried to annotate the code so that if anybody else is coming into it, they can either use it as an example to create their own one, or if they are helping with this repo, they can use it and understand what the heck I was thinking when I wrote it. And I'll be completely honest, most of the comments are for future me because I'll forget what I did.
Yeah.
And then again, same as the edit, you've got a return function, but this one's much, much cleaner. It's literally just the HTML that's going to be saved on the page. And again, you can see the two variables are in there, and the rich text content. So that just puts in exactly what's been typed on the screen. And that is it. As soon as you've done that, you have made a block. So the only thing to do is literally lather, rinse, repeat. So every time you do a change, because we've then got the NPM scaffolding, I can use that to generate a new combined index.js, which is what the plugin will then serve up. So the combined JS is horrendous and really nasty to read, but the way I've done it, the code that I've got, as you've just seen in the examples, is quite accessible and easy for any developer to go in and say, I can understand what's going on here. Yeah. I've also then, because I was using NPM anyway, I've extended it out and put in some other functions. So if you change the Sass, for example, you can have NPM generate the Sass for you and compress it. And then just for fun, when you've finished, you can do it, you can generate a zip file. And the original purpose of that was so that I could send my work to other developers to try installing it as a plugin. But it's actually quite a handy little feature to have in there anyway. So I suppose the question is, how does this actually help? You know, now it's out there in the wild. What is it doing for the NHS as an organisation? And I'd say the benefits kind of boil into three areas. So we've got standardisation or standardising. I'm never quite sure which word to use there. Money and end user experience. So on the standardised side of it, we've got a common NHS brand, which is instantly recognisable. And it's a standard look and feel. The NHS is really good at spinning up a website for any reason whatsoever. And what we don't want is users feeling lost because every time they go to one, it's got a completely different look and feel to it. Also, that then builds trust and familiarity, which means users know what to click on, how to get where they need to go. And because we've been quite strict with the menu setup, hopefully it also forces content creators to think about this, you know. Off the shelf, it means any organization can literally just plug and play. And because of the fact we've got it running using the WordPress repo, upgrades and security updates become a lot easier. I'm sure you're all aware of what happens when people don't press update, and the NHS is probably the worst organization in the world for it. I've come across some proper horror stories. So the next kind of big category, if you like, is money. The average NHS website costs around £5,000 to design. Now, I've put that in there. I haven't got any evidence whatsoever to back that up. I have got 5.5 years of working in the NHS and seeing and finding all of these websites. And I'd say that that's probably quite a conservative average. We have been fleeced by so many agencies for so much crap work. Excuse my French, you know. So, you know, even just the 27 sites we've currently got running this, that's already a significant saving of money. When we do develop designs in-house, obviously it takes employee time and effort, that staff that can't be doing other things. And then on top of that, our users, the people coming to the site, quite a lot of them are NHS staff. A lot of our staffs are internal, a lot of our websites are internal facing. If those staff are wasting time clicking around, waiting for pages to load or not being able to find content, again, that's time they can't be spending on the front line. And if we can get the web right, we can save a huge amount on print materials. You know, we can point people directly to it. I was at a hack day a couple of weeks ago, and there was a fantastic proposal that actually got developed over a weekend. So midwives go out with a bag stuffed full of leaflets for every single scenario that might happen. And invariably they get asked something that they don't have a leaflet for. You know, they then have to go back, order the leaflet, it gets posted to them. Once they get it, they then put it in an envelope and post it out to the client. Well, the thing is, a couple of weeks have probably passed by the time they then get that leaflet, and it may no longer be relevant. So the hack day approach was, instead, the midwife or the health visitor goes out with a sheet with lots and lots of QR codes on it. They then say to the new mum, right, so you've got a scenario that's really rare, but I've got a code here, get your phone out, scan that, there you go, there's a web page with all the information on. So it's things like that where we can leverage the web and actually, you know, make genuine difference to people's lives. Yeah. And obviously in the NHS, time is money, but both of those equal life-saving or life-changing interventions. You know, if we can save 5 minutes per week for each nurse, that's a huge amount of time that could be spent treating patients. Going on to that, patient and user experience, accessibility, you know, it bewilders me that we've been putting out websites that people who have fine motor skills can't click the button because they're too close to each other. Well, we're a healthcare organisation. You know, the people who are likely to be accessing our services might, just maybe, have accessibility issues. So we've put a major focus on that. The fact it's device agnostic. If you've got a device that connects to the internet and has a screen, the website will work. Simple as. And as I said before, we've focused a lot on navigation and trying to force content creators to use some common sense. We don't want a page that's 20 levels deep, because nobody's going to ever get to it. And also, if it's 20 levels deep and nobody gets to it, does the page even need to exist? Because we've got the branding baked in, it means obviously we get the familiarity of users, which then means they're going to be much more likely to trust the content. So if we're saying, you know, if you've been to China and you're sneezing, please don't wander into a shopping centre.
Yes.
They may actually think about it, you know. And because we've inherited the government digital standard approach to both the content and the design, that continues to filter through. So a good example, this morning there was an update to the NHS digital front-end framework. That's already been baked into this theme, and we've already pushed the update out. And clarity, you know, the fact that you've not got clunky design getting in the way. The way I look at it is, if a website design is noticeable, it's failed. Unless you're a design agency, the design should get out of the way and let you focus on the content. So 7 months into this work, I've learned a lot. Not all of them good things, but all of them things that I can take good things from. So I thought it was just worth sharing with you the kind of headline lessons. So the first one, Gutenberg is awesome. It is constantly being developed. They're constantly chucking out new updates, and there's lots and lots of really enthusiastic people contributing and putting pull requests in. This is really good. However, any feature in Gutenberg that has an experimental prefix, use with caution. I only found this out last week, but if it has the experimental prefix, it can be modified, the name can be changed, or it can simply be deleted with no documentation. It doesn't even get into the changelog that it's vanished. The features themselves don't tend to be documented very often. I've lost count of how many times I've clicked around the Gutenberg repo to find documentation to get to a page that then says, this is an undocumented feature. It's not ideal. So a good example is the inner blocks, the dashboard layout I showed you. I created that. It works beautifully with Gutenberg 6.9, and it uses a feature called experimental template options. And because I've been playing with my own sites and I've not pressed update on them for a while, a user came to me last week and said, this doesn't work. So it turns out that experimental feature was dropped in Gutenberg 7, and it was replaced with another one. So I had to go through all of the Git updates and find when it was changed. Found what it was changed to, refactored all my code to use the new name, and it still didn't work. I then found out that the new name had also been dropped and been replaced with yet another one. So I then refactored all of the code again, got it, launched it, put it out as a release last week. Works beautifully with Gutenberg 7.4. I put it out the same day they chucked out Gutenberg 7.5 and it stopped working again. So the takeaway from that is the experimental features give you lots and lots of goodies, lots of things that aren't available anywhere else, but it can be dropped like a hot potato. So the lesson learned is be careful with it. Next lesson I'd say is the underscores framework. We use this as a quick fix, as a get started, put out the proof of concept as quickly as possible, and it is amazing. But it has led to quite a bit of technical debt. And because this theme is quite heavyweight, we're doing quite a few things with it. Underscores is actually now getting to the point it's getting in the way. And if I was starting over, I'd probably not use underscores. And that's not to say it isn't good. It's fantastic, but it isn't the silver bullet that solves every scenario. This one was a really expensive lesson to learn. So code for WordPress compliance from the get-go. If your plan is to put it out on the WordPress repo, go and read the documentation, read their standards, understand it, take the time to go through it in great depth. Reverse engineering code you wrote 5 or 6 months ago is not fun. And it can be really picky. So things like spacing, the dot block formats, code sanitizing, internationalization, they're all pains in the bottom to go through. There's a lot of files in there. And doing it from the outset would have saved us a huge amount of time. And to give you an idea, we originally loaded this theme up for review in September. It's still not live. The theme review queue is long. It's managed by volunteers. If we'd correctly standardized this in the first place, this theme would now be live. You know, I'm not criticizing the theme review team for it not being live. I'm criticizing me for not understanding the criteria to begin with. And the last major lesson is that when we started doing this, we decided we'd try and get communities involved, and we kind of focused very much on the NHS community, which is great. And we've had lots and lots of interaction and feedback from geeks inside the NHS. And almost by accident, we've had agencies coming to us as well and saying, oh, well, I had one last week who said, this has probably saved me 3 months worth of work. How can I contribute? So this is all good, but we haven't done very well at reaching outside of people already engaged with the NHS, which is part of the reason I'm kind of speaking to you this evening, is that there is a huge pool of knowledge and a huge pool of experience that we're not tapping. And, you know, as an open source project that is for the public good, I think that's something that's really important for us to do. So if anyone is interested, please. So what I've put here is the 2 Git repos for where you can access all of our code. The blocks plugin is actually available to install right now, but you won't get all of the source code there. You'll just get the output. If you want to have a play with the code underneath it, you'll need to go to the Git repo. And kind of just finish off with how to get involved if you are so inclined. Even simple things like I installed it and this didn't quite behave the way I expected it to. Please log every issue like that in a GitHub repo. If you do feel so inclined, you know, fork it, make your own pull requests, chuck them back in. We're not precious about it. The more people involved, the better the output will be. Again, if you'd like to go and rate it on WordPress, that would help more people see it. So the NHS blocks plugin is already out there and live. We've also got the WordPress UK Slack channel. I'm quite active on there. Feel free to drop me a message or tag me in any message, or drop me an email. I'll leave the email address on the screen for a while. And basically, as I say, there's no such thing as bad feedback where this is concerned. The more we know, the more we learn, the better the outcome is. And I'm quite keen for this not to be my project. I'm quite keen for it to be a project standing on its own that lots and lots of people have contributed to. And if you do contribute to the code, please by all means slap your name in the dot block at the top. You know, give yourself credit. I think when this it will take a little while to reach critical mass, but I think once it gets some uptake, this has real potential to be right the way across the system. Mm-hmm. And I didn't quite realise until last week. I did a show and tell with NHS Digital, and the feedback I got from that, I didn't realise what an appetite there was for this. So, you know, without being too big-headed, this is going to be really big. You are going to be seeing this on all kinds of sites all the way across the country. Yeah. So I think I've waffled on enough. Are there any questions or feedback?
Are you not slightly worried that other people might start using the NHS branding?
Yes, but it's already out there in the wild. The NHS Digital HTML framework that was launched last January is already open source. It already has all of the styling, all of the design is already out there. Because we're a public organisation, in the end, you know as well as I do, if you want to copy a site and you're so inclined, you can. Yeah. I think the benefits far outweigh the potential risks. So on the customizer, I've put a little message there saying, if you're not an NHS organisation, please don't use the logo. That's as far as I can go.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
You mentioned earlier the NHS is a large and complex and diverse organisation. How easy is it going to be to get your message out to everybody out there who's building a website at the moment?
Not easy at all, and that is a big challenge. So as I was saying, it will take a while to reach critical mass. I think once a couple of big sites have adopted it, funny enough, NHSX, which is an organisation you may have heard of that's been tasked with changing technology in the NHS, is going to be using this theme. So that will be a big feather in our cap. Obviously, the Leadership Academy will be using it from the middle of April. Mm-hmm. The corporate site, we've already got local academy sites using it. We've got about 30 different GP trusts, GP practices looking at it. We've also got an agency that delivers intranets for CCGs, which is clinical commissioning groups. So again, that gets seen by a lot of clinicians inside the NHS. A lot of what you would think of as NHS organisations are actually set up by enthusiastic doctors. They get frustrated that they can't get their information out, so they just go and set up a site. And kind of this is almost targeted at them to begin with. It's saying, look, if you're going to do that, do it, but please make it look something like.
Yeah.
And then I think the adoption will actually be driven by agencies, by them seeing the value in it, that, hang on, we can charge people for value added rather than for recycling the same old pap.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think it's quite interesting as well because I think it almost becomes like a showpiece for Gutenberg as well, because it's like you said, you went out and you found YouTube videos that showed you how to put a block together and what have you. Actually, the repo now is also really useful for other people starting and wanting to see how to do it themselves, because they can build upon it for an external site as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's a double-edged sword. So the way I've used it, using NPM to construct it, means that the code is very readable, and it's quite accessible to come in with an entry point. The downside of it is most of the Gutenberg documentation doesn't quite match my syntax.
Right.
And I've fallen foul of that myself quite a few times by forgetting that, copying things verbatim and going, why isn't it working? So you kind of just have to have a little bit of an eye of, right, you need to duplicate the way it's written on the file you've already got, not necessarily the documentation. But that's quite a nice thing to hear, though. I'd love to think that somebody else had, got into Gutenberg and used this as an access point and then created something amazing.
Well, I know in the community, there's and in the meetups, people that come along here to the Portsmouth Meetup, there are a lot of people that have developed themes pre-Gutenberg who feel unable to do as much in Gutenberg at the moment because it seems to be so new. So it's good to see projects like this.
It's not just that. React, it seems like if you're used to PHP, HTML, and CSS,
yeah,
it's horrible. The only JavaScript most of us have come across is jQuery. And jQuery's A, it's really well documented, but B, it's not that far from PHP, so you can kind of get the concept straight away. Yeah. React is really fiddly. really, really fiddly. You put a semicolon in the wrong place, the whole thing falls over and it refuses to do anything.
And do you think that's where theme development's going to go? Do you think as WordPress developers we're going to have to become React developers?
Yes. There was actually on the theme review channel on Slack with WordPress, it's now a weekly meeting which is using Gutenberg for themes. Yeah. I would say it's probably going to take about 2, maybe 2.5 years, but that is definitely the way it's going. There are already some experimental themes out there that use Gutenberg.
Right.
Now, I'm undecided on it. I love the idea that you're giving users the power to customize absolutely everything. At the same time, it's absolutely freaking out that users are going to have the power to customize absolutely everything. Yeah.
Yeah.
The potential for some really ugly sites is huge.
Yes. Anyone else? Well, thank you very much, Tony.
No problem at all. I would just like to say, one of the things that kind of enthused me about Gutenberg was a WordPress meetup in Ipswich last year, where somebody who was a really early adopter showed some of the blocks they'd made with it. And that gave me the confidence that when my boss said, we've got to do this, I went, oh yeah, we can do it in Gutenberg. It's not a problem. So although they'd used advanced content fields, which is why I started there, it's hopefully there's a bit of pay it forward happening here. That somebody else will take this and go, do you know what? I can play with that as well. I'm by no means a React expert, even 7 months in, but I'm comfortable with it now.
Yeah. I shall definitely go to the repo and see whether I can have a little play around myself. So
Fantastic. Well, thank you ever so much for having me. It's really appreciated.
It's been a really interesting talk. Thank you very much for your time, Tony.
Thank you.
Let's see if I can